Hey y'all! Today we are doing the Get to Know Your Fantasy Reader book tag that Julie Janice Books tagged me in, and that was so sweet of her. Thank you guys all for joining me, and welcome or welcome back to some of you. These are some very interesting questions that required thought and not putting the same answer for a lot of them. Mostly was thought. Some of them I knew like yes, but then I was like wait. If you haven't seen one of these videos before, this is a list of 9 questions that are all fantasy books or you related, and this required some thought to not put the same books or authors or things in the various questions. The first one, what is your fantasy origin story? And honestly, I cannot remember. Like, I believe that I've always been reading books with magic or fairy tales and stuff like that. I honestly don't remember what really got me into this, but I'm sure it was something magic-y. Like, I do remember reading the Chronicles of Narnia when I was younger. I read those before Harry Potter, but of course Harry Potter was a very big part of my reading. And then all other sorts of YA fantasy, stuff like that. Books that probably nobody has ever heard of anymore, and series names I don't remember. All Tolkien-y things. I love that, and that really opened it up to the wider world of fantasy and discovering the Wheel of Time. Still my favorite. I want to get into reading more fantasy. I've loved Sanderson's works since I finally committed to starting his works. And yeah, so honestly, I cannot remember though what first started me in it, so I kind of failed this question. If you could be in a story, who would be the author and what trope would you insist on? So this is really hard because I want to say Holly Black because I would love to be in one of her fae fairy tales because I love the way she writes the fae and I would like to be a fairy. So there's that. Or this is really hard. I don't know, because Jordan is no longer with us, but you know, to be in that world and be trained as an Aes Sedai, that would be really cool. That would be really, really cool too. What is a fantasy book you have read this year that you want other people to read? This is probably the hardest question because there's been so many good fantasies this year. Like so many. Not just like ones that I read this year that came out this year, but ones that have come out before and I was behind. The First Binding by R.R. Verity though was beautiful. I probably mispronounced his name again because I think I added an additional R, but the storytelling, the writing, I enjoyed it so much. It was a very fun time. It is a very large book though, so know that going in. I also really, really adored and enjoyed The City of Dusk earlier this year, which is like almost a younger type feeling, but it's very dark at the same time. But 2 different styles of writing, but they were both so very enjoyable. So yes, I would like more people to read those books. What is your favorite fantasy subgenre? So if you have not seen any of my other videos or could tell by some of my ramblings earlier, epic fantasy is definitely my favorite genre because of the grand world building aspects, the magic systems, the details with which everything is explained. Yes, I love it. I love our grand worlds. I would go to each and every one of these if I could. It would be awesome. And for the one that I have not read as much of, and that would probably be heroic fantasy, where we just have the one hero and him just doing a battle or a conflict and stuff like that. That one I haven't quite read as much of, so yeah. Who is your auto-buy fantasy author? Holly Black. Ever since Tithe, way back when, I got it. I won't say the first year because my copy is paperback. And I did get Ironsides the first year that came out, and that was a hardback. And unfortunately, those books will never match, and you can't find them in that style anymore to have them match. But those from her original part of the modern day fairy tales, I love them. I do. It really got me into her and her fairy world and how she just keeps expanding it with other books and series that are within this world, and it is just awesome. How do you typically find fantasy recommendations? Nowadays, I would say BookTube recommendations or anticipated releases, some Bookstagram, Goodreads upcoming release notices, Google searches that I'll do myself to find out what's coming up in the next few months, and yeah, or just, you know, looking up specific authors. Sometimes like Barnes and Nobles or Books a Million emails, you know, they'll be like, what's coming out that's hot, but those don't normally come until like a week before the book's coming out, a month sometimes. So it's a little bit harder with those. But yeah, and that's pretty much how I find them these days. What upcoming fantasy release are you most excited about? Okay, so like this year, of the releases for things, there's so many sequels or continuations. It's like the ending of Mistborn is coming up, but I still haven't started Second Era, but hopefully soon. So I'm kind of excited for that, but you know, I can't read it yet. So, and next year, all the secret projects, I can't wait to start getting those boxes. So excited to read those. But for this year, that's not a continuation, and also one of an author that I haven't actually read before, but she's very highly liked, and that would be Tread of Angels by Rebecca Rowanhorse. So she is the author of Black Sun and Fevered Star. I know she is very highly loved, but the description for Black Sun, I wasn't sure about it, so I haven't ever picked it up. But the description for Tread of Angels sounds so cool. It is a new mineral found in Colorado. It's not our Colorado, because it is inhabited by the descendants or of angels and demons, and this new mineral is called Divinity, and everybody's trying to claim it. And so yeah, it sounds really cool. The book cover is also kind of cool, as it's got this golden feather falling, you know. So I'm looking forward to that one coming out this year. What is one misconception about fantasy that you'd like to lay to rest? So I haven't heard that many misconceptions about fantasy. I don't know. Maybe some people hear this a lot. I think the only one I've ever heard of is that it might always have to have elves and dwarves and be in this old style mythical world. Which, yeah, I don't think a single fantasy book I've read this year has elves or dwarves. Alright, question 9 was a really hard one. Mostly because it asked you to narrow it down to 3 books. And obviously, I have not been good at narrowing it down, this whole list. It says, if someone you know who doesn't read much fantasy asks for book recommendations, what are the first 3 books you would recommend? So, hard. And also, it's going to depend on what type of books they already read and how old they are. Young readers would get probably A Series of Unfortunate Events and Harry Potter. Really young readers, you could even start them out earlier. The Magic Treehouse. That was definitely super historical information and fantastical creatures. If someone has mostly been reading YA and, you know, they're looking to do a little bit higher grade, I would recommend Mistborn. Even though it's sold as a YA book, it does read and can cross genre a little bit into the adult, I feel like, because it is bigger than most YA books are. It introduces you into the epic scale of adult fantasy for sure. So yes. For adults though, if you've only ever really read fiction, I would say now fairy tale is a really good introduction, because the first part of the book is based mostly in our world, and then he goes through a magical portal and into this fairy tale-ish realm, and it's fantastical, and it reads very light style fantasy with influences of darkness, because, you know, it is Stephen King, and the Brothers Grimm, and all sorts of things. So yes, I will now start recommending fairy tale to people who are looking to like bridge the gap there. So that was more than 3, but yeah, it really depends on the person you are suggesting it to. So you have to tailor things around like so. There are also so many more options. So this was a really, really hard task. Question/prompt number 10 is to recommend someone else to do this video. So I will tag a few creators down below who have enjoyed watching their fantasy review content, and I know that they do read the fantasy books. Anybody else though who does enjoy fantasy and just wants to put out this type of tag video, feel free to consider yourself tagged. I would love to see everyone to do it. It would be so fun to see answers people come up with, because some of these were hard to, you know, get various different answers and not just say the same thing over again. I hope you all are finding something awesome to read today though, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!